Since we read the reading passage the other day, I'm not going to go ahead and read the whole thing over again. We're just going to talk about the questions. Number 1. The author probably wrote this passage to blank. They want to know, why did the author want to write this passage? We have A, persuade you to study the moon. B, entertain you with stories about the moon. C, inform you about what scientists can learn from craters. Or D, explain how to use information about craters to calculate how fast meteoroids are traveling when they hit the moon. The answer that we should have picked was answer choice C, to inform you about what scientists can learn from craters. If I looked at this passage and I read it carefully, persuade doesn't make any sense. They're not trying to change my mind about anything. Entertain doesn't make any sense because they're not trying to get me to feel something, feel happy or sad or scared or anything. So there's only two answer choices that would have made sense. C, which was to inform, or D, which is to explain. Inform makes more sense because it's telling us what they can learn from the craters. They tell us about the different things they're able to learn. D isn't as good of an answer because the whole point of the passage wasn't just to show us how they can figure out how fast the meteors were going. They didn't tell us what the steps were to do that. So answer choice D is not as good of an answer choice as answer choice. Question 2. Scientists measured the depth of 4 craters. Their data is in the table below. Which crater was caused by a meteoroid moving at the fastest speed? They give us 4 meteoroids and, 4 craters and how deep they all were. 5 meters, 25 meters, 4 meters, and 27 meters. In our passage, they tell us that, let's see, where was it? Something about the craters. Here we go. You can tell a lot by looking at these craters. If a large rock hits the moon's surface, it makes a big ring. Smaller rocks make smaller rings. A deep crater means that the rock that hit the moon's surface was moving very fast, while a smaller crater means that it was moving more slowly. So that one sentence tells us how to find the answer. If the crater is deeper, it means the rock was moving faster. All we have to do is, since they want the fastest moving meteoroid, we need to find the deepest crater. Crater A is 5 meters, crater B is 25 meters, crater C is 4 meters, and crater D is 27 meters. Crater B and D are very close, but crater D is the deepest. So that means our answer should have been crater D. Question 3. Another good title for this passage would be blank. So if they had to pick an entirely new title to give this passage, what should they name it? They give us 4 answer choices: Learning from the Moon's Craters, Scientists on the Moon, Tycho the Crater, or Objects in Space. The one that makes the best sense or the most sense would be answer choice A, Learning from the Moon's Craters. Makes the most sense because they tell us what are they able to figure out or find out by studying these craters. Scientists on the moon doesn't really make sense because they weren't telling us about scientists that are on the moon. They're studying it, but they could be studying it here on Earth. Tycho the Crater doesn't make as much sense because even though they do mention the crater that's named Tycho, the whole story is not about that one crater. It's about all of the craters. And D, Objects in Space, is not bad, but the passage wasn't focused on all these different things that you can find floating around in space. It was focused on the craters. Question 4. Scientists found 2 crater rings, one on top of the other. They could tell A, how fast the meteoroids that formed the craters were traveling, B, the crater on the bottom was older, C, the shape of the meteoroids, or D, what the crater should be named. The correct answer for question 4 was B. They could tell that the crater on the bottom was the older crater. They had some pretty good answer choices for this one, but they did have one that I thought was just a very silly answer choice. Answer choice D was a very silly answer choice. Just because there are 2 craters there, that doesn't give us any hints or tell us what they should name the crater. So that's one that we might have gotten if we were guessing or not paying very much attention. But if we're reading the questions carefully or reading the story carefully, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Haley, put them away for now. You can mess with them later, baby. That leaves us with 3 answer choices. How fast the meteoroids were traveling. Just because there are 2 craters, that doesn't tell us how fast there were, or how fast they were moving when they hit the moon. That just tells us there were 2 of them. C doesn't make sense because the craters are always the same kind of shape. They tell us they're bowl-shaped craters. It doesn't say anything about different shaped rocks making different shaped craters. So the shape doesn't make any sense. The best answer is B, because just like if you were going to take pieces of paper, you're going to take 2 pieces of paper, start making a pile of them, you'd put one down on the bottom and one over the top of it. The piece of paper that's on the bottom is the paper you put down first. If there were 2 craters, one on top of the other one, the one on the bottom had to be there first, which means that one on the bottom has to be the older one. It couldn't have gone the other way around. Because if you had a smaller crater and then a bigger crater over it, it would just make the smaller crater go away. It would basically be like it wasn't there. So if you can see that one is on top of the other, that means that one is the older crater. The one on top is the newer crater. And question number 5, why aren't there as many craters on Earth as there are on the moon? A, people are able to keep the meteoroids from hitting Earth. B, meteoroids never come to Earth. C, Earth's atmosphere causes most meteors to burn up. Or D, people fill in the craters that are formed. This was one that I could have found directly from reading my story. Looking for here. Paragraph 2. The moon is covered with craters. Craters are bowl-shaped holes. They are formed when objects from space hit the moon. If these same objects were to head toward Earth, they would probably burn up or get slowed down by our atmosphere. So it tells me right there, the reason why we don't have those same kinds of craters on Earth is because when objects approach the Earth, when they enter the atmosphere, they get burned up, they slow down. The next sentence tells us, but the moon has no atmosphere, so there is nothing to stop them from hitting the surface. So the reason why these things hit the moon is because there's nothing around the moon that slows them down or burns them up before they get a chance to smack into the moon. So they can just hit the moon full force. On Earth, we have the atmosphere that's around the Earth, so when they enter the atmosphere, they start to burn up. Literally burn up like if they were set on fire. They don't really get a chance to hit the ground, or if they do, they're not quite as big or moving quite as fast as they were before. So the correct answer for question 5 would be C. Earth's atmosphere causes most meteoroids to burn up.